followed by a smack in the mouth. Your nose is gone, it's moved to the west, and your collarbone's gone due south. Now you just ask his little mate Lou, who's never been a liar. You are never safe from Captain Blood, the infamous Jack Dyer.
Yes, hello and welcome to Grumpy Old Men. As you can see, tonight is a very, very special show as we look back and we remember the life of a great man in Jack Dyer, who was farewell today at St Ignatius Church in his beloved Richmond. And we're going to bring you tonight some Richmond heroes and also some media heroes who worked with Jack, along of course with Bob, and I suppose his right-hand man and his sidekick in the Collingwood champion, Lou Richards, who's going to join us on the couch tonight on Grumpy Old Men. He's going to go right through the show with us and remember his great pal in Jack Dyer. Lou, welcome to Grumpy Old Men.
Thanks, Kevin.
It was a very, very special day today, and I thought Bob was fantastic. He spoke beautifully about Jack today, and you were sitting there in the front row. You must have had some great memories.
Well, we had some great times, and of course, the more serious Jack was, the funnier he was. And but Bob did a great job there today, and he had the place in stitches, and I just loved it too, because it brought back so many memories of Jack and Bob and myself, and doing league teams, and also going away to the country doing sports nights. And I'll never forget, we went to the country once. I got up in the morning, I didn't have a comb. I'm not having a go at you, Kevin, you're all right. But at any rate, I went and knocked on Jack's door and I said, Jack, look, I haven't got a comb, can you lend me one? He said, you don't need one, you've got to improvise. And I said, what do you mean? He said, get a fork and comb your hair with a fork. Now, I'll tell you, any guy that's sitting at home now, go out in the kitchen, get a fork and try and comb your hair. It's not about impossible.
What about in terms of playing? Did you play against Jack?
Well, I did, and I played against him down at Victoria Park one day, and I was only a kid, 18.
Did you kick him in the shin?
No, I didn't kick him in the shin, but I'll tell you what I did. We didn't have a side with many ruckmen in it. You know, they weren't any good. The ball's out of bounds, and they've thrown the ball, and there's not one of our ruckmen within sight. So Jack's going for the knockout. Being a cheeky little rabbit, I came from behind and went for the punch and tried to knock it out and hit Jack behind the ear. And Jack just turned around and went, bang, hit me right in the chin. I said, listen, you big mongrel, why don't you just hit someone your own size? And he said, listen, son, if you don't like it, take your school bag and go home. It taught me a lesson. That was Jack.
Well, I must admit that the first time that I ever encountered Mr. Dyer, I came down from Ballarat, a little callow youth, and went to the Punt Road Oval, and there were these fearsome Moppy Fraser and Desi Rowe and Max Oppie and Priestley, and how were they? And Big Jack into the bargain. I think that I played very nicely on the half-forward flank that day, right on the line. I didn't have to worry too much. But the next year, I was fortunate enough to have Jack as my captain and coach in the first time I ever went interstate. And from that moment on, I think I struck a friendship with him that lasted, well, for 50 years.
They were pleasant blokes down there at Richmond those days, like Max Oppie.
Oh, they used to corral you, didn't they?
For night time.
That's
now.
right.
He used to wear I don't know if you know, see Tony Jewell there. He used to wear a leather guard on his wrist there, but was reinforced with cane. And he'd give you a backhander with that. I tell you what, you didn't want to go near him for the next 5 years. He was a shocker. Be a great mate of mine now. He's got to be.
Did you think Jack led those with that fierce desire, you know?
I think he did.
Yeah.
But Jack, he just loved football, and he was a great player. It was a beautiful kick. And he tells that famous story. You know, he's having a shot for goal, scores a level, and he finished up winning the game for Richmond, kicked the goal. Anyway, they said, how could you win it? You're a goal down. He said, well, I kicked the ball, he said, and the ball burst. He said, and the cover went through the goal post and the batter went through the point post. I got 7 points and won the game. And Jack used to tell these stories. You know?
We used to have them at the World of Sport. We'd be sitting there, or at league teams, just before it started, and something would come up, and Jack would have a genuine story.
Yeah.
Like, if you know, one of his greatest sayings was, if you don't mind umpire, and I said something about the umpire. He said, what about that day when I was playing out at Glenferrie Oval? I said, what was it, Jack? He said, well, I was creating mayhem. He said, I was putting the Hawthorn fellas down left, right and centre. He said, they were going down like 9 pins. And I said, what happened? He said, one of them got a bit of cheek into him, and he come up from behind me and whacked me that hard I went down on my knees. And the whole ground stopped, he said. The players stopped, the umpires stopped, the spectators stopped. They were all waiting for me to get the free kick. And the umpire's standing there. And then all of a sudden it dawned on everybody that the umpire wasn't giving a free kick. And just then the game was about to start, and the engine driver going past on those blew the train whistle. And Jack looked up at the umpire and said, there you are, even the bloody train driver knew it was a free kick. He was a marvel with stories. Like, he could adapt any story, couldn't he, Lou?
Well, he hated Collingwood, as you know, Kevin.
I was going to say, Lou, we know that Jack didn't like Collingwood.
He hated them.
And even when he came down and he used to speak to the players, it was a true story. He said to us one day he doesn't even like watching black and white television, right. And he actually meant it. And the times he came down to Tigerland to actually speak to the players, invariably it was when the Tigers were playing Collingwood, and particularly at Victoria Park. Well, but he loved you.
Well, we were mates for a long time, but the thing was that when he was playing at Victoria Park, he knew why that Collingwood beat them at Victoria Park, because he said what they used to do, in the dressing room, we used to put a 10-watt globe in the dressing room, and he said, of course, you know, it's hard to see with a 10-watt globe. He said when they run down the race and hit the sunshine, they couldn't see for a quarter and a half.
That's right.
Collingwood had 7 goals on the board before they knew what day it was. He said then if they were having a bad trot, they'd open up the gates at the Yarra Falls end. That's the end Richmond were kicking in. The wind would come in and blow the ball back into play again. You know, all these things he used to make up.
Well, we said today at the funeral that it was quite amazing that today is exactly 54 years to the day that Jack Dyer played his last game of AFL football when they farewelled Jack down playing against Geelong. And he kicked 6 goals that day, Bob, on the state fullback, and he kicked a goal with his last kick in AFL football.
And you might know this, Kevin, but actually he got 1 vote in the Brownlow medal that day for his 6 goals.
You know that because you used to get the Brownlow votes from the umpires yourself.
Did you get the 3 that day, Bob?
No, I didn't know, but in actual fact, Jack, in his 312 games, accounted for 86 votes. That's the total of votes that he got. And the time that he ran, I think it was in 39, he either ran 3rd or 4th. He was very upset because you know who won the medal that year? A Collingwood man.
Probably Fothergill, wasn't
No, Marcus Whelan. Marcus Whelan.
I think you pointed out today, Bob, that the only time he got rubbed out in AFL football was for hitting Jock McHale Jr., the son of the famous Collingwood coach.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And he got
4 weeks for it. And Jock McHale Jr. got 4 weeks for it.
I don't think he touched him.
No, he wouldn't go near
it.
him.
Jack wasn't really a dirty player. He was just a strong player. And, of course, if you weren't big enough, that was too bad. You had to be, you know, a man's game, as he said. It was the true saying.
He didn't mind knocking little fellas over,
no,
did he?
Did, but we were playing at Punt Road one day, and there the centre used to get bad there in the centre. Anyway, Jack's got the ball, used to put under his arm and run with it. And I'm in the middle of the ground. I'm the next cab off the rank. I thought to myself, oh, this bloke's going to kill me. So I gave him, as he got near, I gave him a sidestep, and he slipped. And I grabbed hold of him, and he got hold of the ball against him. Well, the crowd went mad, and then the fellow in the cartoon, the Herald cartoon, had me, was Goliath and David and Goliath, me standing over Big Jack as the giant, the Goliath. Anyway, Jack never forgave me for that. He used to try and get me even every time I played.
Now, Louis, Jack actually helped you kickstart your media career.
Well,
because he used to write for the Herald Sun, didn't he?
He did, and then Jack went to England with Ted Rippon. And they asked me would I fill in for him. I said, yeah, I'll fill in, but do I get the sack when Jack comes back? And Frank Daly, the editor, said, no, we'll keep you on. We'll find something else for Jack. Anyway, I kept the job, and they gave Jack the flick, and he went to the trip. But he never looked back with that either, because that became very successful.
With diarrhea.
Diarrhea. You couldn't get a better name.
Yeah, that's a marvel. A fella could have a newspaper column called Diarrhea. And I think it was full of it, to be truthful.
Yeah. Well, Brian Hanson was a great mate for him, too. He did a wonderful job for Jack, and but Jack used to let him do it, and Jack's smart. It was smart. He never tried to improve on Brian Hanson, because Brian was a real pro.
Well, there's so many people today at St Ignatius, and we'll have a bit of vision today because the church was packed there. some great people turned up, not only from the Richmond Football Club, but from all clubs, wasn't it?
Right.
It was just marvellous to see some of the great champions from other clubs.
Well, Jack
Eddie Maguire was there as the president of Collingwood.
Right.
And, of course, Jack is the symbol of the footy show with, you know, Jack Dyer on the front of the logo of the footy show, and he was there. And it was just great to see, you know, old Tigers like Des Rowe was there, which was, you know, absolutely fantastic. And, you know, Roger Dean was there, and Tony Jewell was there, and Tom Hafey was there. I mean, it was just marvellous to see just a huge range of Richmond people, plus the young Richmond players who formed a guard of honour, and they're magnificently attired with their, you know, all the club blazers and uniforms on. And I think they did Jack, you know, so proud today in being there and showing their support.
He'd have been proud of it, Jack, because he loved Richmond and he just loved the people around Richmond. He loved the Richmond supporters. And he was great to kids. And I've never heard that man in my life use bad language or be rude in front of a woman. And that's the thing I respect him a lot for, because he was a big, tough guy, but when it came to have women in the company, he was a gentleman, a first-class gentleman, Jack.
In today's football and that, if anybody wants a role model, they couldn't get a better fella than Jack Dyer. His football career was absolutely fantastic, and then his off-football, you know, his media career was just as good. And he was genuine father figure to me, A, as a footballer, and B, then as a commentator and everything. I mean, I was lucky. I grabbed hold of Louis and Jack's shirt tails, and I just got spun up into the dizzy heights. No, but it, you know, it really was. It was fantastic, Kevin, and to have those two fellas, and he would come down through Geelong. He had friends just out past Drysdale a bit there, and he'd come down, and he'd always come in and say, "How are you, Margaret? How are all the girls?" He knew the girl's name. He knew his guy's name. He was just a fantastic family fellow. No doubt about it.
Well, Lou, you mentioned about, you know, Jack loving kids, and I mentioned today that even when I was just 16 playing in the under-19s and I got injured at the start of a game in a final, and I was in the rooms waiting, that I looked up, and I'd never met Jack Dyer in my life. And I looked up and Jack Dyer was there. Now, it was so early in the morning, just the fact he was there for the start of the game is extraordinary in itself. And he was there and he came in and spoke to me. He didn't know me, he didn't know whether or not I was ever going to play AFL football, one game, let alone go on and ironically pass his number of games. But he sat there with me and chatted. And what you're saying, Louis, he probably saw me go down as a young boy, felt sorry for me, thought I'd go around. He's a Richmond player. I'll go around and sit with him and see how he is. And it just happened that I was waiting for an ambulance to come, and Jack sat there with me right throughout that period of time, at 16 years of age.
Well, Jack's big thing was he broke so many collarbones. And
yeah, but he used to tell us then, didn't he?
He was 65 and then got up to about 85 before he retired from Channel 7.
How big were the fellas?
Oh, about 3'4".
We'll take a break, Louis and Bob. We've got a very special show tonight. Of course, we're remembering the great man, Jack Dyer. And we'll come back. We've got some very, very special guests. We've got two premiership coaches from Richmond. And also we've got a man who, along with Jack, was one of the most formidable radio commentators and team covering football in this state. It was the captain and the major. All coming up on Grumpy Old Men.
Everyone knows the Auskick comp for kids. Well, now there's a show just as cool and just for kids. Oz Kicking Around.
Guess what time it is, mate? What time, Dan? That time. What time?
Footy stars.
What are you doing?
Footy tips.
It's all about stopping your man from getting involved.
And here's the best part. The only grown-ups allowed are the ones you want to see.
Oh, not you two again. How are you, fellas?
Luke Power, with a name like that, shouldn't he play for Port Adelaide?
Oz Kicking Around. 6 o'clock Friday.
Simpson is proud to sponsor AFL Auskick because we can't think of a better way for kids and parents to spend their time together. Simpson, time for life.
Capture your world the digital way with a digital camera from Harvey Norman. The 3.2 megapixel new 300 features 3 times optical zoom and a sleek weatherproof case. Buy now for $749.95 and receive a bonus Adobe Photoshop Elements 2 valued at $179. That's right, a 3.2 megapixel Olympus camera with bonus software, all for $749.95. Or save $100 on the 4 megapixel new 400 for only $899.95. Includes the Adobe bonus. Get snapping now and save with Harvey Norman, your digital camera specialist.
Go, Harvey Norman, go!
Face. Yeah.
WWE Unforgiven, live on pay-per-view. Monday, September 22. Call your service provider and book now.
Sunday, the battle lines are drawn at Amy Stadium when the Power clash with the Crows. The showdown, the biggest ever. Port Adelaide versus Adelaide. Sunday on Fox Footy Extra.
John Raymond Dyer was born in Oakley in November 1913, but grew up at Yarra Junction. Educated at De La Salle and St Ignatius on Richmond Hill, Jack, as he was known, would make his senior debut off the bench in round 2, 1931. In 1931, Richmond would meet Geelong in the grand final. Dyer, in only his 6th senior game, would play in that losing Tiger lineup.
He knocked a tooth out and split another one over here this side. I had a good set of teeth at that time too, and that messed them right up. That started but I was down, I was crying just about.
Crying, Jack?
Just about. I was 17. You're allowed to cry when you're 17. Like, yeah, you know, when you're amongst them and you're allowed to cry. Well, the tears come to my eyes, let's say that.
A year later, at the age of 18, he would play the first of his 16 games for Victoria and would win the first of his 6 club best and fairests, the award that now bears his name. A remarkable achievement considering he injured his knee so badly in round 12 that his career was in doubt. Despite playing only 10 games, he still polled 4 best on field votes to finish tied for 5th behind Hayden Bunton in the Brownlow. The injury would cost him a place in the Tigers' premiership win over Carlton. After finishing runners-up 4 times in 5 years, Richmond would lead at every change to win their 3rd flag by 9 points. It would be Checker Hughes' last game as coach for the Tigers. A year later, Dyer was back. The Tigers in the grand final against the famous Foreign Legion of South Melbourne, starring the likes of Laurie Nash and Bob Pratt. Dyer, with 26 kicks and 15 marks, and Kevin O'Neill in defence starred, but the Tigers were never likely to upset the raging favourites. In 1934, Melbourne celebrated its centenary year. Bob Pratt kicked 150 goals and Laurie Nash kicked 18 for Victoria against South Australia. The Swans looked imposing. They would be no match for the Tigers. Jack Titus, goalless a year earlier, kicked 6 at full forward in a best-on-ground display. Not yet 21, Dyer had played in 3 grand finals and with Perce Bentley and Rover Ray Martin formed one of the most feared following divisions in football.
I could only run straight. I couldn't turn either way, so yeah. But that's why I collided so much with people. They didn't know that. I collided with 3 of my own players. I put 2 of them in the hospital too, you know, because I couldn't pull up. But I used to have to warn them, now, don't keep in front of me. I can't pull up at top pace, and I can't turn off you, so be careful.
It was the Dyer toughness, the run-through, bone-jarring shirt front that left opposition players in a heap, that led sports writer John Ludlow to christen him Captain Blood, after the Hollywood swashbuckler of the time, Errol Flynn. The name just stuck.
Yes, Captain Blood. Surely the best nickname ever in the history of AFL football. With the passing of Jack Dyer today, that means there's only 2 living Richmond premiership coaches, and that is Tony Jewell, who won in 1980, and Tommy Hafey, who coached the Tigers to 4 flags in 67, 69, and 73 and 74. And they join us on Grumpy Old Men tonight. Tommy and Tony, welcome. It was such a special day for football today, not only Richmond people, but very special day because I think Jack nearly transcended, you know, all sorts of football because people loved Jack Dyer. Have you got any memories of Jack growing up, Tom? Did you see him play?
I saw him play quite a bit. A very strong, vigorous, determined, courageous, everything you like to say about him, but he also was a skillful and a very quick player. A lot of people don't realise that. They just hear about his stories knocking people over, but it wasn't only that. He was just a tremendous sort of a leader and a very, terrific player.
Very quick, wasn't he?
Oh, very quick.
They say he was super quick, and then he injured the knees, and as he said then, it was very hard for him to stop at full pace, Bob.
You know what he once told me about his knees? I said, what those big black bandages on your knee? He said, I would have been a superstar. He said, only my cartilages went. I said, well, what do you do now? He said, I have a penny. And he used to strap a penny to each...
So that was the way.
Yeah, he used to strap a penny to each side of the cartilages and hold the cartilage in. So I said, turn up. He said it's fair dinkum.
Well, of course, Tony Jewell joins us as well. Tony, welcome to Grumpy Old Men.
Thank you.
The first time that you met Jack Dyer?
Was actually my first night of training, and I was that nervous, and I didn't know how to get in the car park, and I parked up in the Berry Street and walked down the hill. And I actually didn't know much about VFL football in those days because I'd started younger in the VFA. But anyway, getting out of the car was Graham Richmond, and I didn't know Graham at that stage. I had met him through Albie Panham, and Ron Carson, who I'd never met, and Jack Dyer. Well, I nearly turned around and went back up the hill. I mean, Jack to me, and as I said, I didn't know a great deal about VFL, but I certainly knew who Jack Dyer was. And it was brought out today how, in a time when the media wasn't huge, that a man could have such a huge reputation, and I certainly knew who Jack Dyer was. And when I saw him get out of the car, as I said, I nearly turned up, walked back up the hill with, you know, I was that nervous about it all.
But you shouldn't have been nervous with Jack because he was a very easy bloke to talk to, wasn't he?
Know him, yeah.
Very easy.
Very, very approachable.
Everybody at Richmond would say exactly that, but everybody in football. And I think everybody should understand that he was very, very willing and open for anything to do with Richmond. And Graham and Ron Carson and Ian Wilson, when they're doing all their recruiting, they take Jack Dyer, walk up start. There was no such thing as zoning at that stage. But if you took Jack Dyer, you definitely got a big chance of winning the recruit.
There must have been a legendary thing. Ron Carson, from what I can gather, had a garage or a used car yard or something.
Like to drink.
Tommy wasn't supposed to know about that.
Oh, wasn't he?
But
there was something, Tom,
He had a car yard in Swan Street, Richmond. Yeah. Just over the road from there.
I think it might have been Sly Grog too.
It was a drinking house for the boys.
Was that?
Yeah.
But Jack and Brian Hanson were there all the time. In fact, it used to be said that Brian Hanson would write his article in the back office with Jack at that particular time.
The diarrhea.
The diarrhea.
It was true that he was a legend, Ron Carson, you know, as far as Jack was concerned, and as Richmond. That's right, is that?
Yeah, bigger than Elvis Presley.
Yeah?
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic around our club. And
he was on the board and he was a treasurer of the club.
There's people like that at all clubs, but I guess that Jack was just so approachable and everybody felt at home with Jack. So the players would have seen a lot of Jack because he was always down there.
Yeah.
But Tom, actually down at the club itself, he was a pretty quiet and humble man, Jack, wasn't he? He didn't sort of push himself onto the coach or the players of the day. Did all the work behind the scenes with Graham. You know, even in the middle of the night, they'd hear about a player, so Graham would jump into his car because he wanted to be the very first guy on the doorstep there, you know, when the sun came up. And he'd pick up Jack on the way, and Jack would always, you know, jump in and he'd be his partner and he'd be the ace in the pack, you know, in signing the player.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Every time, you know, I mean, it'd be pretty hard to knock back Jack looking across the kitchen table, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, there's another famous story about Jack Dyer and your uncle. Your uncle, was he coached there before Jack, or did he get Jack's
he was coaching
job?
the reserves and Jack got the flick, and Albie Panham took the job, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because Harry Dyke was a fan of Albie's, and of course Jack and Albie never hit it up at all. Jack hated him for taking the job.
And he came from Collingwood.
Yeah, he came from Collingwood, and I think he got crook on Albie Panham too, because Albie Panham used to take the coke and the empty bottles
That's
out.
right. I heard that story said if there were no towels or oranges or something, he'd go out and get all the coke from the boiler and take it home as well.
Well, we played them one day, and they beat us by about 30 goals out of Punt Road. We had a pretty crook side. And after the game was
that unusual?
It was unusual then. It wasn't unusual then, so we didn't have a very good side, but it was traditional for the away side to go across and have a drink with the the home team. And not one of our players or committeemen went over there. I was the only bloke that went over there. And it used to be a wire cage at Richmond there. I don't know, it was a kind of a property room or something.
That's right, yes.
Do you remember
there was
that?
a wire cage there.
That's right. So when I get there, there's no Collingwood players there, and all the Richmond blokes, and they're kind of giving me a bit of a sneer, you know, and Jack Dyer said, come and sit down here, son. And he said, and all you blokes, you look after him too, and make sure he's treated well. And they did treat me well. It was a marvellous thing to do.
Yeah. When you were a player, Tony, Jack would come down, but invariably it would be when the Tigers did play Collingwood.
We played Collingwood, that's right. And he came down once when I was coaching. It was a night game, and we were playing Collingwood that night, and he appeared in the rooms and talked to the boys. And I remember he just talked with almost hatred about about Collingwood. It was that he didn't give us any way of winning or what. It was just he spoke of his hatred for Collingwood.
It was the enemy up the hill, wasn't it?
Up the hill.
Go up Punt Road.
Yeah.
That's where the enemy
hated
is.
him.
He did. He really genuinely hated him.
And there was a few blokes at Collingwood that hated Richmond too. The Colliers weren't too keen on it, were they?
And actually, that famous comment when Jack said, you know, he doesn't even like watching black and white television. That is one of the
true saying.
That's a truism, because
that's right.
Jack actually used to tell that to us as players, because there's a lot of I suppose embellishment of some of the things that Jack has supposedly said over the years.
Oh, he could
but that was
romance.
one thing he actually did say.
Well, that talking about embellishment, I don't know if this is true, but I heard the story about when Jack was coach and things were going shocking, and they were getting they'd had a terrible beating for 2 or 3 weeks, and then this game, by half-time, they'd hardly scored, and they all came in, and the fella said, you better go and talk to him, Jack, we're not travelling well. He said, I can't think of anything to talk about. He said, well, start all over again. So he said he went in, and Jack stood up on the stools, you know, he used to have between the things. And he got the ball, and he had it in this huge big hand, and he put it up like this. He said, this is a football. And one of the Richmond ruckmen said, not too fast, Jack.
They use it on so many ruckmen, haven't they? Now Jack's got the blame for it.
Tony, I thought it was terrific the way the present-day Richmond players were there today. They looked fantastic. They were just, you know, they had the blazers on and the shirts and the ties, and Jack would have been very proud of them. Do you think a lot of those present-day players know of Jack Dyer, and you think today may have inspired them in some
Yeah, I must say
way?
I was thinking that it was obviously very sad that Jack's passed away, but I was that pleased that the players were there to get a feel for what the club's all about. I mean, we get players from all over the country, and they're only young boys, and a lot of them really wouldn't understand what they're playing for, who they're playing for. They're given a few bob and come across, but today you couldn't walk away from that place with the people that were there, and both yourself, Kevin, and yourself, Bobby, talking about the great man. And I was that pleased the players were there, because I just thought it not only just our club, but football in general, what it does for the community. And gee, I mean, if that doesn't inspire them in some way, I'll be most surprised.
Is it true that he played 19 or 20 seasons for 19? Was it, Kevin? 19. Richmond only missed the finals six times in all the time that Jack was there. I mean, that is amazing, and just to give proper credence to how good Jack was, and I spoke of it this morning, there are over 11,000 fellows played league football, and everyone wants to play, don't everybody wants to play, 11,000. And when they chose the team of the century, out of all those 11,000, Jack was in the first 21 pick. That just gives an indication of how great a footballer he was.
And you've got to remember, also, there was only a 4, not an 8.
Yeah.
That's
like in the finals, he's only missed 6 times in the 19 years he played.
Fantastic,
that's even, that's only 25%, isn't it, really, of the whatever.
He played 151 games, winning games at Punt Road Oval. Jack?
He lifted the spirits of people, Jack, didn't he? I think it was mentioned today, and we spoke about it, that he gave people something to laugh about and smile about, something to talk
and
about.
And the more serious
someone to boo, someone to boo at the same time, because during those war years and the Depression years, you needed heroes, didn't you? You needed someone that you could look up to and aspire to, and you know, the Tigers, you know, winning 43 and in the Premiership in 1944. It would have given so many people just a bit of relief from the war and just to concentrate on something else.
But that's what our football's all about, isn't it, really?
That's right.
And when we talk about our team, the Tigers, it wasn't our team, it was everybody's team. And they all had these great people. But as the years got going, and particularly with these 3 fellas, with the way that they were on World of Sport and footy teams, they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we all just loved them. It was a compulsory viewing. You wouldn't miss it, and you just they came right into your bedroom, right into your lounge
Casey,
room.
that.
Well, you've got to, and another thing you've got to imagine about Jack. Jack played. We all have golden eras and that, but the 30s must have been a golden era, because each team had Collingwood had the Colliers, and South had Pratt and Nash, and you know, Hickey and Metherell.
Names in the game,
The
Bob.
greatest names in the game, Hayden Bunton, all the champions were playing in.
Yeah.
And Jack was the equal of them, if not better.
Yeah, he didn't like Brownlow medalists.
No, he
couldn't stand
wasn't too sure about the
them.
medalists.
He said there's
no.
something wrong with them. He used some other word, start with a P. Brownlow medalists, he couldn't stand it.
He didn't like psychologists either. Not only could he not say it, I can remember at World of Sport when I appointed Rudy Webster, the West Indian fellow, as a sports psychologist, and he grabbed me down to World of Sport, and he tried to say psychologist and couldn't quite get it out, but he said, this head shrink, he said, what do you need him for? And I said, well, look, there's a lot of players that lack confidence, and I said, I could have abused one when I played, we all sort of, and he just said, Sonny, he said, I'm telling you, if they get where the ball ain't, no head shrink's going to help them.
Kevin, I was around that hotel, we went past the day in Lennox Street there, I can't think of the...
what,
Sammy's.
Belclues?
Sammy's, I think it was. And Jack and I and someone else was having a drink in that saloon bar, and I went through the public bar to go to the toilet, and there were 4 present-day Richmond players in the bar. And I said, Jack, when I came, I said, there's 4 present-day players in the bar, they're having a drink, Jack. He said, they said they don't worry today. He said, they're all professional men. I said, what do you mean? He said, they're engineers or nuclear physiotherapists or something, And that was Jack,
Well, today we pointed out to people he started his life as a panel beater, as an apprentice panel beater, and
Didn't use a hammer.
Started beating up people on the field rather than panels. He was in the police force for 10 years. He owned a flower shop.
Well, Bob Davis upset him about that because...
He was a publican?
Well, he was in the police force with Ted Rippon and Laurie Nash. And we struck the commissioner one day, and he told us about Jack that, and he said, and tell Jack to bring back his bike pump and his bike clips.
Had his bike clips, that's right, his trouser clips.
But he sold them.
Yeah, he did one day when he was, I don't know whether he was a detective or just the ordinary...
No, he wasn't a detective.
Didn't he become a detective? No. Oh, well, he was in the CID.
He had a magnifying glass.
Well, anyway, they sent him out to Footscray somewhere to one of those sly grog shops to investigate it. And he got in there and unfortunately got a bit of a skinful, Jack, and he wasn't too good when he came out. And he went out to the car and got in. And then he jumped out quick and he got on the phone and he rang the CIB. He said, hey, you better come out. My car won't go. Someone's stolen the steering wheel. He didn't realise that he'd been sitting in the back before.
You can make up these stories a bit, too,
The days on World of Sport, Tommy, when you went in there and Tony went in there as coaches and Jack used to, obviously talk to you about the game. I mean, afterwards, did he always come up and just, confide in you about the Tigers and mainly more interested in the Tigers than maybe, any of the other games that took place?
Oh, absolutely. Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you when you know what he's all about?
Yeah.
It's the Tigers, that was his club, and if he wasn't at that particular game, he'd be always talking about them. Yeah. No, he was black and yellow right through.
He used to like taking things home from World of Sport, like the gold nugget ham, and Bob Davis and Neil Roberts cut it in half and pinched it, you see, and Doug Edgeworth do the commercial.
He was allowed to take them home. We don't want people thinking that Jack was a bit like
you weren't allowed to take these home anyway, but the hole-proof socks are you allowed to take home anyway. They'd knocked off the ham, they put it back, but all of a sudden there's something else missing, and they're all standing around there, and Jack's got his handkerchief up here, and they said, put that back. And all of a sudden Jack pulled it, and 3 pairs of socks jumped out of his pocket. And this is the way it used to go. That's why the show was so great, because everyone was mates, and Bill Collins was the biggest scandal of the lot, too. Teasing people, wasn't he? Shocker.
Yeah. There's a bit of talk in the press that maybe Punt Road should be renamed the Jack Dyer Oval. You got a thought on that, Tony? You're down there, you're on the board of the Richmond Football Club. It is going to be discussed, we believe, at board level.
I think it's got merit. The only thing, we've been known for so long, the boys from Punt Road or the Punt, and Punt Road seems to also synonymous with Richmond. That, I reckon it's got merit.
Well, you could have the Jack Dyer Punt Road Oval, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Of course you get one. It's called the Dyer Oval.
Certainly to honour him forever, and that'd be great.
They'd be saying diarrhea, wouldn't it?
Diarrhea. Well, even Victoria Park's called the Jock McHale Stadium.
Now it is. Yeah, I think that'd be very
Stadium.
traditional. It'd be very good to do it for Jack because he deserves it. And Bob and I have had some wonderful times with him, and Casey absolutely idolised him. He wanted him to do something, and he couldn't get in touch with him, so he said to his secretary, he said, why don't you send us a telegram over his place? So we sent a telegram over, no answer. Sent another telegram, urgent telegram, no answer. And he sent the third one, the real urgent one with the red, you know. And Jack, she said, why don't you go on over in that street off Lennox Street, Docker Street. Go across. Anyway, Casey decides to go over, knocks on the door, and there's Jack comes to the door, and he looks over on the mantel shelf with the three telegrams unopened. And Casey said, the telegrams, Jack, you didn't open it. He said, no, I never opened a telegram. And Casey said, why? He said, it could be bad news.
He was marvellous like that, wasn't he? In terms of, you know, all the catchphrases.
They were true sayings, really, weren't they?
True sayings from Jack right throughout that period of time.
Yeah. Well, I put this tie on especially today for Jack because the AFL sent it to us, and there it is. There's, if you don't mind umpire, there he is, right on the front of the tie, Kevin.
What about in terms of World of Sport? Just who came up with the idea to sit Jack at one end of the World of Sport,
Casey.
And then, of course, Lou Richards was at the other end, and you sat next to Jack?
Yeah, I sat next to Jack.
You were there just to what?
Just to annoy Jack, yeah.
So to keep prodding him?
Yeah, and I'd say, yeah, what he said up that thing. Who is he, the little whippersnapper?
So you'd argue actually across the table. Yeah, the rest of us who actually made World of Sport in those days, which was a great thrill, we were just sort of like cutouts. We were just sort of in between, whilst Jack and Lou at either end, and then, of course, Bob sort of egging both of them on, you know, conducted the whole show.
Well, Lee Teams was the same. He put Bob between the two of us there. But Jack, really seriously, never had a great sense of humour. He was pretty serious. And the more serious Jack was, the funnier he was. He used to look, you know, and I used to say to Bob, now, you repeat what I'm going to say. And I said, now, and it's just going to be the gag I'm going to tell. Why don't ants have balls? And Bob said, and Jack would say, oh, righto, you two. And Bob would say, no, why don't ants have balls? And I said, because they can't dance, you know, and Jack couldn't get over this. He'd get upset, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah, he got very... He used to say, well, you tell them about those lovely ladies that came in from...
I think I mentioned it before, didn't I, about the transvestites?
No, you haven't mentioned it. It's not on the show just yet.
Well, we used to have them on. We used to have all sorts.
I think we're going to hear about it.
But we had from my BLA the transvestites. The three of them came on. They were, you know, and they were sitting on our knee during the
league
teams. And when they went, the commercials over, Jack said to me and Bob, "Hey, geez, the one sitting on mine, he was a good source. It's a bloke, Jack." And he said, "Listen, I don't care. He was a good source." Anyway, he goes down to World of Sport on the Sunday, and Casey always interested in what Jack does, not what Bob and Lou does. He said, "How'd you go with those my Bear Lady people, Jack?" Jack said, "Oh, fantastic, Case, fantastic. But I tell you what, the one I sat on my knee was a good source, but I didn't know she was a transistor, quite seriously."
There's talk also, Tony, that the number 17 jumper, which is in mothballs at the moment, no one wears that down in Tigerland, that, you know, maybe in some of the sports we see overseas, in baseball and ice hockey, that they retire the jumper. Yeah. Is there a chance that will happen, or do you think the club will just hold it and maybe at some stage, you know, pick a player that they think might be worthy of it?
Gee, you'd have to be... I mean, if you're going to hold it the size of someone who's worthy, you'd have to be pretty good, wouldn't you? Yeah. And the burden of carrying...
You'd want to be very sure that the belly of Peck was good,
yeah.
wouldn't you?
And don't pick a rover, for God's sake.
No, and... or the son of an ex-Collingwood player, was
That's right.
Just so, again, that's got great merit to put it away in mothballs forever. You know, that... I think that'd be, again, another great touch because... As I say, oh, mind you, there's been some pretty good players worn it since too.
Yeah.
Barry Richardson,
that's right. Barry Richardson, and Maurice Rioli.
There's Alan Edwards. Freddie Clark wore it after Jack, and he was the father of Neil, the lad who died last year. And he was a player who probably played for a few years without really hitting the high spots.
Well, he was the first player. They held Jack's jumper over, didn't they, once he retired? And Freddie Clark was the player they chose to wear his jumper.
Yeah, that's right.
But now he's passed away, it might be fitting, mightn't it?
Yes.
Tom, do you think that the AFL should find some special type of memento for Jack Dyer? You think that the AFL should perhaps start a foundation or something that, you know, would help a young fella that looks like being a footballer not only turn as a great footballer, perhaps turn into a great media personality, put him through, you know, a media school or something? Is there something that Jack should be remembered by from the AFL?
Well, I don't see any reason why not. They do that on a lot of occasions, don't they? Different clubs. I know we've got the Jack Dyer Foundation, but a lot of clubs do things like that, and why not? Like the memory.
That's right.
You couldn't get anything better, and I don't know why. I understand where you're coming from, but why not?
I do think that the Richmond Football Club, Kevin, and Tony and Tommy should be congratulated on the name that Jack Dyer is an immortal of the Richmond Football Club. I just think that is absolutely fantastic.
It was interesting today, sorry Kev, but interesting today what that number means to people. They had it out on the printed on the ground in dye, and there was no fence around it or rope around it. Not one person, not even a little kid, no one. Everyone stood in the square around it looking at this number 7, didn't they, Tom? Yeah. And not one person walked on it. And I noticed when people were leaving the ground, they walked around it.
Yeah. And the shot from the helicopter was fantastic as well, because we saw it on a couple of occasions.
Just quite incredible, the fact that no one would walk on this.
Fantastic, just fantastic. Tom, before we take a break, on Sunday the Tigers play Hawthorn, and you're going to speak to the crowd out on the ground? Yes, I am. I've got the match with the ABC for a start, but I'm also going down and speaking to the crowd, which is a really lovely honour. But, yeah, no, I'm really pleased and quite thrilled that they asked me to do that.
The last time we used those rooms too, the rooms that we played so many grand finals out of the same, it's the last time we used those rooms, Tom. I didn't know if you were aware of that. Yeah. So it's a big day for Richmond. So maybe we can say to the Tiger supporters, get there against Hawthorn, get a big crowd for the last game of the year. There is going to be a minute's silence for Jack at the MCG. It's the last time that as you say, the famous change rooms where the Tigers ran out and won all those premierships out of the MCG, because it's all going to be knocked down before they get around there next year. So it's a very special day for the Tigers, and Tommy speaking, as Tony says, come along and support the Tigers on Sunday. We'll take a break. Fantastic, Tom and Tony, thanks for joining us. It's been a very big day, and we do appreciate you dropping into Grumpy Old Men. But coming up as a man, they made history on radio. They were the top, broadcasters of football on radio, and they were just simply known as the Captain and the Major. Coming back on Grumpy Old Men. Tonight on White Line Fever, I'll be joined by Docker CEO Cameron Schwab to take your calls on the Derby and the club's first finals campaign. Plus, lion-hearted Bulldog Steve Pretiuk, he's preparing for his last game. That's White Line Fever tonight.
It's the latest and greatest, available now from Harvey Norman. The all-new Samsung Duo Cam, where two worlds combine so neatly into one. It's a fully featured digital camcorder with a 10x optical zoom lens. Flip it over, and it's a 4.13 megapixel CCD digital still camera with 3x optical zoom lens for spectacular photos. Add USB connectivity, pop-up flash, and 2-inch LCD screen. This remarkable compact Duo Cam is everything you need for an amazing $24.99. Like it, want it, get it now at Harvey Norman, leaders in digital innovation.
Go, Harvey Norman, go!
Friday, the Magpies try desperately to hold on to second spot when they take on the Bombers in an AFL blockbuster at the MCG.
The goal of the afternoon on the step.
Collingwood versus Essendon, Friday on Fox Footy Extra.
Join Matt Tilley for Fox Footy Channel's variety quiz show. AFL stars and personalities go head-to-head on Dropkick, coming up next.
The image suited Jack just fine. From 1937 to 1940, he was Richmond's champion player. He remains the only man to have won the club best and fairest 4 times in succession.
What I miss too in football is after the match, the team should go into one another's rooms, have a drink, no arguments, and just say, next time when we do, we'll kick your bloody head off.
After being eliminated in the preliminary final of 1935 and the first semi-finals of 37 and 39, Richmond under captain coach Bentley made the next step in 1940, but it would be a controversial season. Dyer's father Ben, a club committeeman, had wanted Bentley replaced as coach and wanted Jack named captain. The club's best player was looking for a clearance to the VFA. Bentley kept his job, Jack relented and stayed on. In the second semi-final, Dyer flattened Melbourne star Norm Smith. In the grand final a fortnight later, Dyer would be tagged out of the game by demon Jack O'Keefe.
It was a day that I like to forget in my football career, because it was one of the worst days I suppose I've ever had in my life, because when I went out on the ground after we'd beat them so badly in the semi-final, they changed their side with about 9 players, you know, and brought other young players into the side, and they propped that Jack O'Keefe on me, and he followed me around everywhere. I couldn't move without him, and well, I complained bitterly to our captain and coach, but nothing.
Well, whose job was it to relieve you of that shadow?
Well, I think it was Bentley. He was captain and coach at the time, and he's a very strong sort of a customer, but I couldn't move because the umpire forced me about 4 times in 4 minutes, so it was just a matter of if I do anything wrong, I'm gone.
While Melbourne would win convincingly, Jack Skinny Titus would kick the 3 goals he needed for his 100th goal for the season and the VFL goal-kicking title. This would be Bentley's 263rd and last game. He'd been captain for 9 years and coach for 8. Dyer became playing coach. After being beaten by Dick Reynolds' Essendon in 1942, Dyer was fuming. In 1943, he vowed revenge. The niceties were forgotten soon after the pictures were taken and the coin tossed. Dyer decided to play young Max Oppie as the stopper on his famous cousin, the triple Brownlow medalist, Dick Reynolds.
I was told to sort of look after him. When I mean look after him was to shadow him and try and block him out of the game. And with no restrictions.
None?
None. And of course, being at that age, I always did what I was told, especially by Jack, of course, because I feared him. I didn't fear Dickie, but I was frightened of Jack.
Richmond trailed by 5 points going into the final quarter, and with Dyer kicking 2, Essendon failed by just 5 points in the tightest grand final since the Tigers won in 21. Harris kicked 7 for the Tigers in a sensational performance. Sadly, Jack Titus had not been part of the team. After 295 games, including a remarkable 204 in succession and 970 goals, he'd retired. In 1947, after a stint with Coburg, he made a one-off comeback for the Tigers reserves and kicked 12 goals. Dyer had become more of a fixture on the forward line, his errant kicking with a punt replaced by the more accurate drop punt that he quickly called his own. 20 years later, he'd show a couple of wide-eyed kids named Bartlett and Mick Irwin that he'd lost none of his touch. In the 1944 preliminary final, he'd kicked 9 goals against Essendon for the right to play Fitzroy at the Junction Oval for the flag. Dyer and Morris went into the game carrying injuries, and the Tigers went down by 15 points.
Of course, some great vision there from sportsdelivered.com. And that's from Tigers, the Fighting Fury, and all that vision we've seen with Jack Dyer tonight and some of those other great Richmond players like Jack Titus, and you can pick up on the Richmond Tigers Fighting Fury. Of course, we said before the break that one of the great things about Jack Dyer was his media. We know about television, working with Bob and also working with Lou Richards, but on radio, he was equally as famous. He started at 3XY with a man called Ian Major, and then went across to 3KZ, when they became better known as Captain and the Major. And Ian Major joins us on the couch on Grumpy Old Men. Ian, welcome. It's been a very special day in sending off Jack today, and it must have been such a sad day for yourself because together you had a wonderful partnership.
Yeah, it hit today more so than the other day. When I heard the news the other day, it was a bit of a relief because Jack wasn't in good health at the end. And today was the celebration of Jack's life. But when some of the memories came out today, you started to wipe the tear away a little bit. And before we go any further, Lou, Jack would never forgive me if I didn't say, how do you mean he didn't have a sense of humour? He had the greatest sense of humour of all time.
Well, I mean, his sense of humour was different, I say that, because...
How did you begin together, Ian? Were you...
Oh, I was a turntable operator, Bob, at 3XY for a start.
And did you call football or anything like that?
Not at the time, no.
No.
And I just... You know, the same as everyone. Mr. Dyer, how are you when you start? And everyone's Mr. And after about the first week, he was one of the few people that said, just call me Jack. And that's how it was with Jack. And then I went up to the bush and came back again. And I was doing a disc jockey program. And then the station were looking for someone to be more in-house, apart from Jack, because they'd gone through, I think it was Freddie Tupper had been there, Doug Elliott had been there, Cyril Stokes, Craig Kelly, but they wanted someone in-house rather than just hiring a guy on Saturday. And I was playing a fair bit of footy and sport and doing all those things. And they said, well, you're it. And I said, I'm a bit young to start as a sporting commentator, aren't I?
How old?
I'd be 22. And I didn't want to give up playing football at the time, to be honest. And I came to him and said, Ian, you don't take it, someone else will.
Yeah.
And I said, you've got me, I'm in. And that's how it started.
And they said Jack Dyer's your on-air partner?
Oh, I knew Jack, yeah. In fact, I was going out and doing stats at times the previous year or things like that and helped them around, yeah.
Is it a true story that Jack used to write his teams on the back of a shirt box? The back part of a Polaco shirt, the big, you know, one in red and one in black or something like that. He had the teams.
He would write it on anything, Bob.
Would he?
It wouldn't have to be a Polaco shirt box. He would write it on any cardboard, any piece of paper, the butcher's paper or whatever. Whatever was handy, Jack would write it on.
Because in those days, how they were named in the newspaper was the way they lined up. So if it said Davis was playing on Bartlett, you could actually write down Davis and Bartlett.
Exactly.
And that's who they played on for the entire game.
Yeah. But Jack worked at XY with me and Doug Elliott first, and then Doug moved to UZ, and he thought he'd take Jack and I with him. But Mr. Mogg was your boss then.
Frank Mogg.
And he said to Jack and I, we want you to stay for an extra 20 quid a week. Uncle Doug didn't
Everybody keeps saying we'll give you an extra so-and-so. You were a marvel at it.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Jack
No
and I,
wonder you're a millionaire, Lou.
Yeah. Well, we actually stayed, Jack and I, and Doug got very cross about that because he went on his own. He thought he'd take Jack and Lou. Anyway, Jack and I went together for 2 years after that, and then finally I had to go to the Sun. But we had some great times, Jack and I, working
Ian,
together.
what about 3KZ? Because I suppose that's when most people become aware of, you know, the captain and the major. Who came up with the name the captain and the major?
I came up with the captain and the major.
3KZ is football.
I came up with the captain and the major, and one of the people in advertising came up with 3KZ is football. And you mentioned the diarrhea. That started because of talkback. And when Jack started to do talkback, he'd get on the phone and say, diarrhea.
Yeah.
And that's how diarrhea started. And everyone used to laugh because it doesn't sound exactly like Dyer.
What about some of the sayings? You know, his arms went up like giant testicles.
Well, we know that's not true.
That's
He
right.
didn't say that. That was Sammy Newman at the Sportsman's Clubs. And Sammy did his own renditions of Jack Dyer and the sayings. And Sam said to me one day, he said, have you ever seen my Sportsman's Night shows, Mage? And I said, no, I haven't, Sam. He said, you better come along one night. You'd be interested to know what we do.
What about in terms of broadcasting? I read the other day they spoke to you, Ian, and I think it was Frank Marcazzani was playing one day for Fitzroy.
Yeah, that'd be right. That's a true story.
And that's a true story.
That's definitely a true
Jack
story.
had a bit of trouble with a lot of those
had
ethnic
about 5
names.
different goes at
Marcazzani.
and then I turned around and said, actually, Jack, I don't think that was Marcazzani. I think he's down there. I think it was so-and-so.
DP Domenico had him mixed up a bit.
Yeah, very much so. But David Parkin's got something to blame for that, because I said to David, how do you pronounce the guy's name, Dave? And I think David was coach at the time. And he said, you go Di Pier Domenico. So that's how we got Di Pier Domenico. And Dipper said years later, he said, it's not that, it's Di Pier Domenico. So David's got to wear some of the blame for that.
Jack was famous on radio because he used to broadcast alongside yourself, and he had a cult following, didn't he? Because
huge following.
I mean, you topped the ratings for every year that, you know, football was going. People just loved... Jack had a great voice, didn't he?
Yeah. He had a sensational voice. And this is where people don't realise, and what a great caller he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, go back to the early days, and unfortunately, all the stuff we've got is just nowhere near what the Jack Dyer was of in the key stages of his calling. And of course, some of the better stuff is on a scratchy old record that you can't even play.
No.
Or it doesn't come up for the audio.
Some people say that you could listen to Jack for 5 minutes and not have any idea where the ball was. Is that true or not?
That's a terrible thing to say, Bob.
Oh, okay.
And on the day of his funeral,
I know,
you're in trouble too. I'll do Jack's finger point.
Yeah,
you're in a lot of trouble, sonny.
You do that a fair bit, did he?
Jack can get the finger out. When Jack got the finger out, you do things
He
with
knew
God.
football when he was talking about it, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He knew football.
What about when he was broadcasting Richmond games? Did he have any bias? Because we hear these days people go crooked, Eddie Maguire for bias because of Collingwood.
Well, when you first started in the broadcasting, and Lou would know this more than I because he was beforehand, but you weren't allowed to show bias.
No.
It was into the boss's office on the Monday morning if you showed bias. By the end of the 60s, it was starting to loosen up a bit. Into the 70s, it was a bit better. And by the 80s and 90s, of course, everyone was going hell for leather. If they were a Collingwood or a Richmond man, you could do it. But in those days, you weren't supposed to. But into the 70s, then the Richmond came out. You know,
In fact, you almost went the other way a little.
It was,
yeah.
of showing you who you
That's
your
right,
colours
who
were.
you're aligned with.
And that one that's been used a few times now by a few other commentators, that was true of in one of the finals. The ball's being bounced, and I forget who it was coming down the field, and he's bounced it once, he's bounced it twice. Kick that thing! Because he could see someone coming up on the guy, and if he doesn't kick it, he's going to lose it now.
Yeah. Who was responsible, Ian, for saying Jack Dyer, the living legend? Because I can't recall anyone else being called the living legend when I was growing up, other than Jack Dyer.
No, and that must be attributed to Frank Avis, who was the news editor at 3XY at the time. And he did a bit of football calling with Jack when I left, but then he handed it over to a couple of others. But he came up with the living legend, and no one else was being called the living legend in Australia at the time. Whether Frank just thought it up, grabbed it from the United States, or wherever, I don't know, but he said, the living legend Jack Dyer, and boy, did that stick also.
He was a living legend, too.
Living legend Jack Dyer. Ian, thank you for joining us on Grumpy Old Men on this special day, because you had a wonderful association with Jack. It's a very special part of the media and football calling in this country, and I know you must feel very proud that you were part of it with Jack Dyer.
There was just one lovely line, if I could drop it. I asked what years Checker Hughes was there, and this is another one lost that was on tape. And it was Checker Hughes when someone went out to interview him, and they said, Checker, what do you think of Jack Dyer? And he said, well, some call him the living legend, some call him Captain Blood, but when I think of Jack Dyer, I just think of a wonderful, warm human being. It was a great line.
Fantastic.
Well, it's a lovely note for us to end our program on today as we farewell Jack Dyer. Lou, thanks for being part of the program, along with Bob, because Lou and Bob and Jack Dyer, three of the biggest names ever in the media, and just entertained us on a Sunday, and of course, World of Sport and League teams for so many years. It was lovely to see both them today at St Ignatius. Lovely to see Ian as well. And also for Tommy Hafey and Tony Jewell for dropping in. Now the only two living Richmond Premiership coaches, and just speaking about Jack Dyer. Thanks for joining us tonight on Grumpy Old Men. It's been a very, very special day for us, and we hope that you've enjoyed looking back at the life of Jack Dyer.
Dyer would play his 307th game against Melbourne in 1949, breaking Gordon Coventry's VFL record. But the end was nigh for Captain Blood.
You know, when I came from Yarra Junction, I never thought I'd be a hero. I never thought I'd be a star. It just turned out that way. And gentlemen, in conclusion, I was only an ordinary superstar. When it's all boiled down, I was only an ordinary one.
Well, it's St Ignatius, and then they took me from